Robert, it's time to get up! Robert, get up! The cows need milk! Robert, milk the cows!
Ever since I was a kid, I had a dream of flying. And we were lucky enough that our farm was right under Vector 181, which is from Watertown, South Dakota to Fargo, North Dakota. The DC-3s flew that route day after day, same time, and I kept time by that. We knew when it was time to milk the cows. It was so beautiful to look up at the DC-3 because it always seemed to fly with grace, while other airplanes wouldn't do that. It always had such a beautiful grace to its flight path. It was just so steady and grown along. It had a personality to that. My dream of flying was really solidified by obviously living on a farm. We had bugs and weeds in our field, and crop sprayers would come and spray them. And at that time, it wasn't the industry it was today. And my dad would always make a deal with one of the guys, because he's kind of like my dad, to keep his airplanes in his clover field. Well, of course, that was heaven to me. But I do recall, as a very young child, going from window to window when Mom wouldn't let me out of the house, trying to catch a glimpse of the spray plane coming over the farmhouse and going in the field. And from that very early age, long before I realized you got to work for a living in the world, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted crop spray. And just never looked back. I actually had two issues, and one of them was speech. And I do remember being drug off to the local university and go to a speech therapist so I could talk. And then, of course, the other one was I was blessed with very long eyeballs, or you'd call that severe myopia. It did turn out to be a blessing in disguise in the long run, but it had a lot of temporary downers in life where I felt worthless and a few of those things, and inferior because of the eyes. I started flying in high school just like a lot of kids. You sold your soul for an hour's worth of flying, nothing new to a lot of people. Getting close to soloing, he said, well, you gotta have a flight physical. So I went to see the doctor, and he asked me what I want to do. I said, I want to get a commercial license crop spray. And he actually broke out laughing. He said, but your eyes should never get a commercial license. And that was probably the first big downer in my life. And I was like in a junior in high school, and my world was shattered. It was absolutely shattered. I wanted to be in aviation, and I was reading a magazine, and I saw an ad for Northrop in Inglewood, California, be a mechanic, airplane mechanic. I graduated in March, and by April, I was out in California going to mechanic school. And about halfway through the school, I learned if you can see, which I could, I had contacts and I could see good, you just get a waiver. So then my life come back together, and I just started flying and never looked back after that. Once I realized I could spray, the flat lands of North Dakota are very attractive for spraying. Early in life, the thoughts of a marriage that would last forever was on my mind at a surprisingly young age. And in the normal dating process, a lot of the girls were kind of scatterbrains, I guess. But when I did meet this girl, her name was Donna, and immediately there was something there that I hadn't found before. And we met in January, we got engaged in February, and we were married at August, and that turned out to be my soulmate. And we didn't have a place to stay, we were just building a hangar, so we ended up building an apartment in the back of the hangar, and we lived in that for 3.5 years. As a young kid, I used to read home-built magazines, and I had always had a deep interest in home builds. However, not having any money, I could never figure out how to make money with home built. So I knew I had to make money with whatever I did. So I started rebuilding crop sprayer airplanes because if you didn't sell it, you always used it till you sold it. So it was a very efficient way to use the winners, to use your talents, and that's how I got into rebuilding airplanes. A friend of mine and I that had the disease maybe as bad as I did, but it was undiagnosed at the time. We went up to Fredericton, New Brunswick, and we bought 2 TBM, torpedo bombers. It was a sprayer. We sprayed forests up there. And it was something we could afford. Obviously, could never afford neat things like Corsairs and Mustangs and stuff. So we flew them home and started rebuilding them. And of course, the bomb bay's doors were taken off and a huge tank was put into all the chemical. And of course, the doors were thrown away. And that was quite a bit of structure, and couldn't find any doors. So Jerry realized that they had to be built. And he, the first arms, he actually made them out of melted down John Deere tractor pistons and reforged the arms for it. And he built jigs and built dies to stamp the ribs out, and they come out beautiful. He started selling them because other people needed them also. And I looked at that and I thought, well, maybe I could do that too. Every time you saw a Mustang go by and heard the sound, I just kept being drawn back to the Mustang. And one day I started buying some parts from a guy in San Diego with the idea that, well, if I never get the airplane done, I'd probably sell the parts, probably make some money on the parts. So I did finally go into it, but really not the understanding that I could complete it. But in life, I have only one unforgivable sin, and that's when you're in the old people's home in a wheelchair and you say, damn it, I wish I would have tried. So I did. And parts of 20 different airplanes, and 5.5 years later, I flew the Mustang. One of the parts I'd gotten, which was a finished up leading edge section of a wing, I got my flashlight out and I was inspecting the work, and the ribs had patches on it, and it even had patches on top of the patches. I mean, it was ugly. So I looked at that and I call it my inspiration rib. And I figured out, well, if I need that part, maybe somebody else does too. So rather than crudely hammer out a part for myself, I'd spend more time, make nice tooling, and make one for myself and maybe have an opportunity to sell a part. My good friend Jerry Beck started building the tooling to build the fuselages. And because I needed so many wing parts, because I did end up buying a fuselage, so I didn't need that parts. And that's how we kind of decide who made what and who needed what. He basically built the fuselage and we built the wings, and then between the two of us built a business area where people could drop off their airplane and have it rebuilt. I had a picture of Neil Armstrong, I believe it was 1962, was proudly showing his model of Race 57. And that was one of a handful of Super Corsairs that were built. And the Super Corsair was conceived to counter the threat of the kamikazes diving in the ship. They wanted an airplane that would climb like no other airplane would climb. So they put the biggest engine they had, which was a 28-cylinder Pratt & Whitney, and the strongest airplane they had at the time, which was a Corsair, and ended up making the Super Corsair. The reason there was only 10 of those built is the war ended. They'd ordered like 500 of them, but only 10 of them come off the line. Out of those 10 production airplanes, there's only 3 of them that exist. One of them is in the Museum of Flying in Washington. One is actually at our repair facility, which belongs to the Crawford Museum in Cleveland, and then the one behind me, which I was able to buy. There was a former Navy pilot from the Cleveland area and raced with a standard Corsair with a 2800, and he couldn't hold up to the sleeker Army Air Corps or turning into the Air Force airplanes at the time. So he goes to Halsey and said, I know you got a few of those Super Corsairs in storage. He says, now if you would declare those surplus, we can beat the Army at these races. And by 2 o'clock, I think that afternoon, he had released them all. And he went in and bought 4 of those. I was the 7th guy that tried to rebuild Race 57. I ran across the airplane in Hugoton, Kansas, in the back of a shed. We've met some of the other local people and went out to this guy's shed, and here the Super Corsair, what was left of it, was in the back of the shed. And I looked, I knew what it was, but it was, again, one of those things that, never even envisioned that I would own it. There was 2 farmers that were trying to rebuild this airplane, and they were having problems with their local aerial applicator. And I got thinking, well, gosh, I was getting out of the ag business. Maybe they'd trade this spray plane for what was left. Nah, they'd never do that. Oh, maybe a month later, I'd think of it again, you know. And after a period of time, I finally dared call a guy up. He says, "Are you serious?" I says, "Well, I think so." Anyway, I flew down there and looked at it and actually made the trade. The whole firewall forward was missing. The engine had laid outside for 45 years. By the time we were getting into it, there was such a movement for everything being original. The early Mustangs would have white wheel wells, gray wheel wells, because they would be shiny and clean. And then there's a tremendous movement to make them exactly the way they were. But I knew I didn't want to do that because it had no war history. It never made it to the war. It never made it to the front. Of all the airplanes that flew in post-war Cleveland races, this was by far the prettiest airplane of all. And I knew I wanted to. I was just kind of trying to figure out how I'd get around the criticism. And as it turned out, only one guy ever brought it up. When I flew to Cleveland in '99 and entered in the Heritage Restoration competition, one of the judges from the Smithsonian, which were the judges there, he told me later after I'd won, he says, when I walked out and I first saw that airplane, I thought to myself, who in the world would bring a red Corsair to this thing? And he was just one of those guys that just never knew the history of it. And I had so many of the original pictures. I had pennants from the '49 race. And part of that historic restoration is the history of the airplane. And after he saw that, he was just kind of wambazzled, and I won. It took about 3.5 years, which really isn't all that bad. I stayed on it full time. We had one of the guys that works with us that does hydraulics, that did most of hydraulics. My son Casey actually put the wiring harnesses together, and he was 12 at that time. So the kids were involved from the beginning. My niece helped me with most of the masking, and I did all the painting.
Our daughter just loves to go to Oshkosh.
One of my sons has about 85, 90 hours in a Mustang now. We took it to Alaska to an air show last summer. We've had an opportunity to fly a lot of neat stuff together. My oldest boy, who also flies, which is finishing the other Corsair that hopes to fly it, and he is a pit guy for me on this one. We're racing, and of course we just put the engine in from blowing up the supercharger, and he come out and helped me with that, and he enjoys it, and we enjoy each other's company. They're my best friend. My sons are my best friends. I was racing the airplane in Reno, Nevada, and I was in the bronze race. I started out in the outside. I'd passed everybody there. I had a lap and a quarter to go, and it just decided to quit. And I was making all kinds of metal. I had lights on the cockpit to detect that, and I just declared a mayday and landed, and that was the end of the day. The air races in Reno, Nevada is the fastest motorsport on the earth, and they flirt around at 500 mile an hour, 50, 100 feet above the ground. It's a fantastic rush. It's a real rush. If you have adequate pilot skills, I believe it's a very safe thing to do. Of course, you can't do the air racing without going to school. So Jerry Beck and myself have attended the Pylon Race School, which is an experience in itself. Even if you go through school and never raced, it's an experience that is so much fun because of the relationships that you develop with the other people out, that you share their passions. The person that created Dougie wrote this movie script, and somehow we got worked into producing it. And I've had an opportunity to fly in it.
Last night at the bar, I met this guy, and he offered me a job.
You've got a job.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a real job.
I find athletes, in your case like flyers, to fly corporate sponsor machines at the big air races.
And he came all the way out here to find me.
Why not?
My daddy and I are your biggest threat, but I have a feeling you and I could defuse that.
I'll tell you this much about this guy. He's fearless, and you know, in this race, that's 95%.
You're crazy. That was stupid and dangerous.
Well, the boys are back in town. Get ready for 500 miles an hour, 50 feet off the deck. It's Thunder over Reno.
Unbelievable. Which man is returned to Reno for something that he's probably cross-duster.
Keep that bastard Bandy on the ground.
I won't let you down.
To have a lot of fun with an airplane and not share it with somebody else is a disgrace. I had, after I finally, got enough money to get to where I was, because I kept myself pleasantly broke buying airplane parts, I finally found enough money to buy a DC-3. And I had a chance to meet another person that had passions similar to mine. I've been drawing a picture of a smiley DC-3 his whole life. And a lot of our ideas fit together very, very well, very, very well. So anyway, he had a concept of a smiley DC-3. The reason why he's smiling, because he's the happiest airplane in the world. And the reason he's the happiest airplane in the world is because he's got friends, and the value of friends and relationships. So we took the DC-3 and flew off to a paint shop and had it painted with a smile on his face. Dougie has a mission for kids, to inspire kids and to follow their dreams, just like the creator of Dougie, which the guy's name is Mitch Carley. He's from Columbus, Ohio. And my dreams, we just kind of connected out there in space someplace, and was able to continue both of our dreams and to share them with other people.
Dougie is a living, breathing example that dreams do come true.
And my father's from North Dakota. He was with the Air Force. He worked for North American.
But most of all, Dougie, his friends, and crews inspire all of us from 2 to 92 to reach for our own dream. On Dougie's worldwide journeys, the crew will meet ordinary people doing extraordinary things to make theirs or others' dreams come true. So climb aboard, hold on, and join Dougie, his friends, and crews in Dougie Adventures.
Who's Dougie? The happiest airplane in the world!
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we took it off to Sun and Fun, which is the beginning of the air show season. And the response that we got from everybody. I had the airplane for a number of years. It took it to a lot of air shows, and we had it painted up like a military airplane. There was people that flew it during the war that would walk by and look at it, and they'd have their memories and everything. When we painted that airplane yellow, I think what a lot of the people that flew it during the war looked at it, and it released them. It was closure. I saw more tears in your eyes looking at this yellow airplane with a smile on the face than the one that had his shield on yet. Southern Fun has kids, because the school is still in session, they take busloads of kids out. And we run, I don't know how many busloads of kids through there, and their eyes were as big as saucers. They were so impressed. The airplane has a character to him, and he's a very welcoming character. He's a very friendly character. We had a little girl that just didn't want to leave, and her dad wanted to see other airplanes besides just the yellow one, and she finally come over and hugged the tire, and then she was okay to leave the airplane. So it just touches people from 2 to 92. Our efforts in the Dougie series and the airplanes, rebuilding these airplanes, doing the movie, is not only for the immediate inspiration, but the youth, which is the future of our country, to be able to keep this stuff alive, the stuff that we've been able to do, the dreams that we've been able to attain, to leave a message out there that it is attainable for other people too if you don't give up.